Hey guys, what's up? It's Biscuitboo Horror Reviews. I'm here to talk about a film from, shot over the course of the last couple of years. This film was shot 16mm, made in association with some of the guys over at Massacre Video, as well as some of the crew members and people behind Nurse Jill. This movie I'm talking about is an independent, horror drama art film, called Portraits of Andrea Palmer. This film is a film about a young woman named Andrea who is trying to make a living as a cam girl, and after having a bit of a breakdown during one of her shows, her career is ruined when she insults her audience, but almost instantly she receives a phone call from one of her viewers who says they see a lot of potential in her and they offer her a job in LA. She, of course, goes out to LA, and slowly but surely, she slowly starts to see the darker side of the adult entertainment industry. The first thing I gotta bring up about this film is the acting. The film stars Katrina Zova, who is definitely good looking, but her acting leaves a lot to be desired. She's definitely better at portraying some motions than others. For example, in the breakdown scene towards the beginning of the film, I found myself giggling at her mental breakdown and in pure frustration. Then I did find myself sympathizing with her, like I probably should have. The rest of the acting is alright. There's a couple other people in the movie who just who aren't that good either. But I will say there are some bold performances in terms of nudity and the sexual content of the film, but I'll get into that a bit later. The writing in the film I felt was alright overall, nothing super amazing, but it's definitely a pretty solid script. From a technical standpoint, I think that this film is actually pretty well shot, pretty well lit and edited, etc., etc. I didn't really have many problems with it as far as technical aspects and the editing goes. There were a couple scenes where I think dialogue was probably dubbed over, and it's a little obvious, a little too obvious, but it doesn't break anything in the film. Like I previously stated, this film was shot on 16mm, and it definitely has that shot-on-film look that I just adore. There's nothing, and I mean nothing, that can quite match the look of a movie shot on actual film. The film's atmosphere is one that I could definitely get behind. The film has this kind of semi-surreal, ever so slightly off atmosphere to it, similar to something like Nurse Jill, for example, or The Killing of a Sacred Deer, except in those two films, the atmosphere is definitely better than the atmosphere in this film, but that is for its own, that's for their own respective reasons. The pacing in this movie I felt was pretty good. There are a couple slower moments in the film, most definitely. There's a lot of dialogue, not a lot of dialogue heavy scenes, but there are a couple scenes that involve some dialogue. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore, goddamn. But these slow moments in the film definitely do not drag it down by much. No, one thing I've got to discuss is the sexually explicit nature of the film, because damn is this movie explicit. Not that I have a problem with the film being sexually explicit, because some movies that I consider some of my favorite movies of all time, like The Life and Death of a Porno Gang or Pink Flamingos, are films that are just as, if not even more explicit with their sexual content. But this film but I bring it up mainly because the sexual explicitness of the film might be a problem for some people. Some people aren't comfortable with that, and I guess I can see why some people might not be comfortable with that. I will say this film is practically pornography, but it's not shot in an arousing way, and I don't think it's really meant to be arousing per se. But yeah, it's pretty explicit. That's what I mean when I say some of the performances here are daring, in the sense that there's some unsimulated sex in this movie that is pretty kind of wild for an independent film. On the gore meter from 1 to 10, actually, before I even get to the gore, what little there is of makeup effects, blood, and gore is well done. Especially that stuff doesn't really come until the like final scene in the film, but it's still well done. On the gore meter from 1 to 10, 1 makes it look like Nosferatu, 10 being something like Peter Jackson's Brain Dead. Portraits of Andrea Palmer is probably a 2.5. It's definitely not that violent overall. The final scene is definitely where it gets violent, and it honestly kind of shocked me, because after how the film plays out, I didn't expect it to get that suddenly violent. Really, this is one of those movies that, just like many movies that I've kind of recommended before, prime example being Invasion of the Blood Farmers, although this film is not as bad, nowhere near as bad as Invasion of the Blood Farmers. It's one of those many movies that I find interesting or entertaining or enjoyable, but if I were to give it a solid recommendation, like, hey, this is a pretty cool movie, this is a pretty interesting movie, most people who would go out and see it because of my recommendation might call me nuts for liking it. But I do honestly like this film, despite it being a bit sexually explicit and a little slow at times, and some of the acting not being too good. It's not a perfect film by any means, but it's a film I definitely enjoyed. If you liked Nurse Jill for what it was, with all of its quirks, it being a silent film and it being a semi-surreal kind of John Waters giallo film, slasher film, revenge film, like ball of just sleaze, then this is something you might be able to get behind in a very similar kind of way. Although I would argue this film is definitely a bit more John Waters-esque. In conclusion, I'd probably have to give Portraits of Andrea Palmer probably 2.5, maybe, not 2.5, but 3.5, maybe a 4 out of 5. I don't really know. I'm gonna have to really sit, let that digest before I can get really like a final rating. Anywhere between a 3 and a 4, I would say. This film is very much like a combination of like Roman Polanski's Repulsion and Monster, combined with John Waters' Multiple Maniacs. It's definitely a bit of a trip overall, to be honest. But with that, that is it for this review. Anyway, guys, this is Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews, signing off. Peace.